So let's talk about the ultimate future fake. And you know what it is? The idea of growing old together with a narcissistic person. It really may be the most dangerous future fake of all and has been an utter tragedy for many people in narcissistic marriages, and frankly, even for the adult children of a parent in a narcissistic marriage. I mean, I guess, if you want to be semantic about it, I guess you do grow old together on paper with a narcissistic person if you stay in the marriage, but in the true sense of that adage, do you grow old together? No. This concept of growing old together, I guess we should say successfully, is a real roll of the dice. Because for one person or the other, someone in the relationship is always going to get stuck doing some caregiving, whatever that looks like. At the milder end, it may be someone sort of stepping in and having to do more household duties because bodies slowly give out as we get older. And it may be, at that more extreme end, it may be caring for a person or ensuring a person who is experiencing dementia or other age-related physical impairments is cared for and may need help with things like toileting, getting in and out of bed, maybe even other basic duties like having meals prepared, being fed, being dressed, or being bathed. And in the United States, at least, most of us do not have the money it would take to afford any kind of decent care in this regard when we get older. And we'll definitely run out of money if we even had it in the first place to do this in a matter of weeks or months, basically to hire any kind of paid caregiver. I have had definitely the experience of working with many, many folks who have gone through and are still in long-term narcissistic intimate relationship, 40 plus years, even 50 and 60 plus years. So these were folks who were well into their 60s and beyond. And this is an important group because we didn't talk about narcissism until relatively recently in the way that we do now. And that means that these are people who were tolerating toxic relationships, but didn't have any kind of word or model for it, and then had to listen to BS about how relationships are about hard work and compromise and sacrifice and two to tango nonsense. So people, because of the stigmas around not making a marriage work, persisted, again, because divorce was stigmatized and in some cases was not even possible. But most of them, even if they didn't say it out loud, knew the relationship was a bit of a mess. However, as time went on, those who remained trauma bonded would be reluctant to leave the relationship. And one big justification that we would observe people falling into was the idea of growing old with someone. And that was not a good justification. Listen, I understand the ones about not wanting to go into older age with no money, about losing a home. I definitely get that, and that's very real for older adults, particularly in the United States. But here is the thing that is never going to happen, is that the narcissistic person is going to take care of you as you age. What could happen is that the narcissistic person's health could go downhill before yours, and then you would have the rather unappealing prospect of having to care for an ungrateful, selfish person who has made your life miserable, along with you having to take on the physical wear and tear of caregiving for the rest of that person's and perhaps your life. However, the far worse option, and frankly, the more likely option, is that your health will deteriorate first, and you will have to count on them to care for you. Someday, we're going to get good longitudinal research on the long-term effect of narcissistic relationships and toxic relationships. If we cobble together what we know from other similar research on marital conflict and the like, it is not good for us. And I truly believe that the longer you are in a narcissistic or antagonistic marriage or relationship, the greater the toll on your health. Just from a simple stress model. The constant manipulation, criticism, entitlement, selfishness, the meanness, the stubbornness, the oppositionality, all of it, that accumulation. And keep in mind, most people in narcissistic relationships, especially as they get older, become quite isolated because you were not able to cultivate friendships. Other people may have distanced because they didn't like your spouse. Your children maybe in different levels of estrangement from the family system, whatever it may be. You don't even have a B team to help you out in some cases, or even just people to talk to and get support and validation from. So the odds that you will be the one facing the need for caregiving first is much more likely. So now you are getting older. Maybe you're watching this and you do have some physical health issues, or maybe you know someone who's in a situation, who's in a long-term narcissistic marriage and their memory is waning. Whatever it is, keep in mind, caregiving is no joke. It involves not only the physical aspects, feeding, changing, cooking, cleaning, but also the psychological aspects, reassuring, listening, seeing, and putting the needs of the person who needs to be cared for often ahead of your own. You tell me, folks, watching this video, in what universe would this ever be in the realm of possible for a narcissistic person? A narcissistic person thinks giving someone a glass of water is caregiving. Turning on a television is caregiving. Offering to bring home a bagel when they were already going out for one themselves is caregiving. It's iffy if they will remember any of the medications on a schedule, and will get angry at their spouse that needs to be taken care of when the narcissistic person themselves forgets the medication, because of course the shame that makes them mad at a relatively helpless person. A narcissistic person who is in a position where they do have to engage in some form of caregiving will often gaslight, especially if the person they're caring for has a chronic illness. Things like, geez, you've seen like 1 million doctors and it's not getting better. What's wrong with you? Are you exaggerating? In the most extreme cases of dark tetrad malignant narcissism, we can see the narcissistic person taking financial advantage of, or even being unfaithful, because they feel entitled to it since their spouse is no longer there. Whatever it is that this narcissistic person is doing, this is not caregiving. In most cases, what the narcissistic person does at this stage causes more harm, bringing up grief, as well as inadequate caregiving that can actually do real physical harm. So no, handing someone a glass of water is not caregiving. That's just handing someone a glass of water. Caregiving is a lot more than that. So the point of all this is the future fake. For everyone who sticks out a marriage in the long term, because of fears of growing old alone, who believes that, well, at least I have someone around as I grow old. Listen, I get all the practical reasons, but the idea that this narcissistic person may possibly be available to be a responsible caregiver, probably, in fact, I'd say absolutely not. That moment of them seeing you fragile and them magically growing a heart like the Grinch, it's not happening. Your illness will be their inconvenience. This can also sometimes mean that other people in your world would have to take up the caregiving slack. This can put a pressure on adult children, other family members, people who may be willing to step up, but also may not always be able to. Maybe they live someplace else. Maybe they don't have the financial means and can't take time off from work to do this. Maybe they have their own burdens, like their own children, or maybe other people they have to care for. And not everyone who has been through a narcissistic relationship, as I said, may have these supports. Isolation can mean that bridges got burned long ago, children may be distanced from the system, and some of you may not have children or other people in a family system that could even possibly be caregivers. You may also feel a sense of guilt at burdening adult children with something that you thought a spouse would and theoretically should do. Remember all that sickness and health stuff? I don't think they were paying attention. Then there is the money issue. I have never in all my days doing this work met a narcissistic person who is sane about money. Never, not once. Money is power, and they use it to control people. They spend it to keep people close. They withhold it to punish people. They shame people for spending it. So as time goes on and decisions about healthcare or caregiving come up, and you see the writing on the wall and want to pay someone, guess who is going to fight it? Which feels like a double bind, because not only Are you not able to potentially solicit your own caregiving that you pay for? And it is likely that after a long marriage or a relationship, that your finances are very intermingled. So that's yet another bind. You can't get the money out to pay for caregiving, and they won't care for you. And then the final piece of this future faking that may be the most painful is the grief. After all this time in this relationship, the sacrifice, trying everything, blaming yourself, holding up 99% of the relationship, that you are basically going to be abandoned at a time and an hour of medical need is horrific. It can result in rumination, tremendous sadness, and an unending well of grief at a time when people are taking stock of their entire lives. And that rumination and grief can worsen physical health. It's a terrible cycle and a terrible way for a person to enter the final phase of life. This is real, folks. So if you think you have a built-in carer in the form of your narcissistic spouse or partner, think again and plan accordingly. You may stay financially, but start doing your homework while you are still sound in mind and body. Miracles don't happen in narcissistic relationships. Thanks again.